Imagine, just for a second, opening your morning newspaper, sitting down with your coffee, and reading a massive headline that says, "The Eiffel Tower is about to be demolished." I mean, it sounds completely unbelievable to us today, right? But back in 1925, thousands of people actually believed it. And one guy, a man who looked at this public uncertainty, didn't see a tragedy. He saw the absolute perfect opportunity for what is arguably the most audacious con in history. He forged government documents, he invited wealthy businessmen to a luxury hotel, and he completely convinced them that he had the legal authority to sell one of the world's most famous landmarks. And you know what the craziest part of all of this is? Someone actually bought it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this world-famous landmark wasn't just bought by a victim once. No way. Victor Lustig, the absolute mastermind behind this incredible deception, actually managed to sell the Eiffel Tower twice. We're not talking about some quick pickpocketing scheme here. This was a massive, highly orchestrated fraud that tapped directly into human vulnerability. We are talking about the greatest con artist in history pulling off the impossible. But the real story for our explainer today isn't just about what Lustig did. It's really about why it worked.
And that brings us directly to the central mystery we're unpacking today. How do you convince someone to buy a landmark that isn't for sale? Our main focus is going to be on the deep psychology behind this. Like, why do victims believe fake sales in the first place? How does a person's brain justify handing over a literal fortune for a monument that belongs to an entire nation? Well, to understand exactly how Lustig pulled this off, we really have to look at the specific conditions that make a total lie sound like the absolute truth.
Section 1. The power of context, setting the stage for deception.
So successful scams, they never just happen in a vacuum. They don't just appear out of nowhere. They rely heavily on the historical backdrop and the existing anxieties of the time. They basically exploit what the public already fears or believes. Take a look at the stark contrast between these two realities. On one hand, we have the public reality, the ideal we hold today that the Eiffel Tower is this beloved permanent monument. But on the other hand, we have the victim's reality back in 1925. Post-World War I France was really struggling financially, and at the time, newspapers were constantly debating whether the Eiffel Tower was simply too expensive to keep maintaining. Well, Victor Lustig read those articles very carefully. He realized that if people already believed the tower was becoming a giant financial burden to the state, a fake government sale to quietly dismantle it for scrap metal would actually sound completely logical. He weaponized the truth to sell a lie.
Section 2. Crafting the perfect illusion, the anatomy of false authority.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Lustig built this impenetrable wall of trust. He followed a very precise blueprint. First, he read the public mood through those newspaper debates we just talked about. Second, he forged official government stationery, which gave him instant visual credibility. Third, he posed as a senior French official and secretly invited these really wealthy scrap metal dealers to the Hôtel de Crillon, which was literally one of the most luxurious hotels in Paris. And finally, step 4, he claimed the sale was a massive government secret to avoid public outrage. This last step, absolutely masterful. By making it a secret, he ensured these businessmen couldn't go fact-check him or talk to anyone else about it. He trapped them in this tight little bubble of false authority. The businessmen were totally shocked by the news, sure, but because of these 4 methodical steps, everything looked incredibly official. Section 3, Why the Victim Believed. The psychological pivot. Now, with the trap fully set, Lustig zeroed in on his primary mark, a scrap metal dealer named André Poisson. Now, Poisson was buying every single word Lustig said. But the final hook, Lustig asked for a bribe. Now, hold on, that sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? Like, actually scratch that. It sounds insane. If you're trying to convince someone you're a legitimate, upstanding government official, why on earth would you do something totally illegal like ask for a bribe to approve the deal? You'd think it would ruin the whole illusion. But in reality, this was the brilliant, twisted stroke of genius that sealed the fake sale. So why did this bribe work so perfectly? Well, first off, it made Lustig look like a real, genuinely corrupt government official. In the mind of André Poisson, government bureaucracy was basically expected to be corrupt anyway. So a bureaucrat suddenly asking for a bribe actually made the situation feel way more authentic, not less. Second, it made the victim feel like a total insider, like he was playing the game and getting special treatment over all his competitors. And finally, it triggered the victim's own greed. Poisson wanted to win this massive, highly lucrative contract so desperately that his own desire completely blinded him to the fraud. He paid the bribe, and then he handed over even more money for the so-called rights to dismantle the tower.
And this right here is the very definition of a confidence trick, a scam relying on the victim's trust and psychology, often exploiting their own greed or desires. This completely explains the core of why victims believe fake sales. Poisson didn't just pay for a fake document, he paid because his own human nature was being weaponized against him. The greatest scams in history, as our source material points out, they don't use weapons, they use confidence. They rely entirely on the victim desperately wanting the deal to be real.
Section 4. Shame and the second attempt. The con artist returns. By the time André Poisson realized he'd been completely defrauded, Victor Lustig had vanished into thin air. But Poisson was so incredibly embarrassed that his own greed had blinded him, he never even reported the crime to the authorities. And that dead silence allowed for a truly stunning timeline. After disappearing with Poisson's money, you think most criminals would just retire to a beach, right? Not Victor Lustig. Just weeks later, he waltzes back into Paris and tries to run the exact same scam again. He literally tries to sell the Eiffel Tower a second time. However, this time around, one of the new businessmen got suspicious and actually called the police. But Lustig was slippery. Just days later, literally immediately before the officers arrived to bust him, Lustig managed to slip out of Europe and escape to the United States.
Section 5. The psychology of scams. A legacy of deception.
Now, Victor Lustig's career absolutely didn't end with the Eiffel Tower. Over in the US, he went on to scam banks, he targeted wealthy businessmen, and he even ran this wild scheme where he claimed he could duplicate money using a mysterious wooden box. For years, he led authorities on this massive wild goose chase across continents. But eventually, the luck ran out. The greatest con artist in history was finally brought down and captured by the FBI, and he wasn't just sent to some low-security facility. He was shipped off to the infamous escape-proof prison on Alcatraz Island. And it was right there, locked far away from the luxury hotels and the wealthy marks, that Victor Lustig met his end in 1947.
So the crucial point is this. Ultimately, scams rely on people believing what they want to believe. André Poisson wanted to believe he was getting the business deal of a lifetime. The public wanted to believe the government was finally solving the massive financial burden of the Eiffel Tower. Lustig simply held up a mirror to their own desires. If a scammer knows exactly what we want to hear and exactly what our underlying anxieties or greeds are, then every single one of us has the potential to be vulnerable.
Our source material for this explainer leaves us with this really powerful thought. The biggest trick isn't stealing a treasure. It's convincing someone to buy something that was never for sale. I mean, it perfectly encapsulates the incredible psychology behind the man who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. It really forces us to ask ourselves, what is it that we so desperately want to believe that we might just buy it, even if it could never possibly be ours? Think about that the next time an offer seems just a little too good to be true.